So Eric was saying the first game we did on Steam was Distant Worlds. The second game we did on Steam was Panzer Corps. Coming through a different avenue. I don't know if you remember, David, back in the days we had this thing on Steam called Green Light.
Yes.
So people had to vote which game you wanted to be on Steam.
Beg for success.
Exactly.
Yes.
So whilst the Distant Worlds, Steam called us and said, can we add Distant Worlds to Steam? Panzer Corps was on Green Light, was on the very top of the list. So that was 2014 again. David, Panzer Corps.
Yes.
That's a big one, right? You know, when you joined, we were still working on Panzer Corps 1, right?
I joined and worked on DLCs for Panzer Corps 1. So I was an Allied Corps when I joined the company.
Panzer Corps released in 2011. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, I mean, can you tell the story of Panzer Corps, just in a nutshell, right?
So I think obviously Panzer General, not a new game, an old game, was produced a long time ago and was kind of dead. But then people didn't want it to die. So you have a guy called Alex Shargin, who is kept it alive with, is it Panzer General Forever?
Forever, yeah.
Yes, so he's basically a mod of the game, just doing his own thing. I think at some point Ian and him met and discussed and thought this is a cool thing, we should carry on with this. And so we ended up making Panzer Corps, being an actual full-featured release based on Panzer General Forever, which then turned into an epic success, including one of the best games to sell on iPad, of all places.
That's
right. Absolutely got gobbled up on iPad. It was a whole new thing for Slitherine at the time. It was like, suddenly now you're a mobile publisher, which is a novelty.
Which we're not anymore.
No. Then you've got, from that, then a whole thing of like, well, it's been successful, what do we do now? How about more? So you have kind of the Soviet Corps, Allied Corps, the Axis operations, all the Axis operations and everything else coming out for it. And that's just a huge game that did so well for everyone involved in it and is hugely loved by everyone who plays it.
Yeah, I think the other thing was cool at the time was we were experimenting with a lot of things because there was iPad, which we were big on because we had Battle Academy 1, which was also a big success there, very big success. But we were also experimenting with DLCs and a DLC is really a DLC, or is it an entry point to the game? So I think Soviet maybe and Allied were like standalones.
They're expandalones.
Yeah,
they're kind of
expandalones.
Yeah, because Soviet and Allied were both expandalones, but they were both interconnected. So if you had Axis operations, it would still work on one or the other. It was, it was lots of rolling of dice, and because no one's really done it at that point, which is kind of hard to think about now. But it's like, what works? How about this?
Yeah, and so we were experimenting a lot, and I found it fascinating that, today we have a game that's huge. Panzer Corps 2 is huge, released in 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. And which brings me to Panzer Corps. If you look at Panzer Corps now, you think about it, it's almost take it as a given. But Panzer Corps is a huge game, which required a long time to develop. How do you make such a big game? What are the moving parts?
Oh, well, it's one of those things that it kind of needed more collaboration I think we'd necessarily done before, because we have Alex's team in Flashback Games, who are still a relatively small studio, and making a game that is now fully 3D, not 2D like Panzer Corps 1 was, and just not set up to produce the sheer thousands of planes and tanks and ships and infantry that suddenly a 3D game needs. So we got suddenly then very much a tight integration with kind of our art team at Slitherine, especially people like Pat Ward, who led a lot of the art design on it, then working with outsourced companies to kind of bring in the sheer weight and quantity of every Panzer that has ever been or ever will be. So it's a sudden real kind of knitting of us as more than just a publisher, and kind of a publisher and a facilitator.
How do you get, because one of the things that you were saying earlier, it's interesting because you need to get the style right, because that's what you're going to be sticking to for.
So if you're making 1,000 planes, which I think it's 1,000 tanks or 1,000 planes, if you're going to make 2 planes, you need to know what plane 1 is like. So all that time you need to spend on plane 1, because otherwise you've got to make 1,000. If you don't get it right, you've got to remake all those 1,000, and that's like however many hundreds of thousands of dollars down the pan, which is not our way of doing it.
No, absolutely. And Panzer Corps is still one of the most played games we've got, or probably the most played, well, other than Broken Arrow now, of course, it's throwing all the numbers out the window now.
If you want to go and look at, who is still playing it, it's people playing it all the time, because every release of Panzer Corps gives you so much content, and importantly, the design decisions that the guys made at the start, both Ian and Alex had a lot of talk about design decisions. Kind of, how do you make it so that you play through once, then you play through it again in a different way, and all the ways you can customize your commander, all the ways you can customize your force, your core force to take forward. It's huge once you're done with it.
Is there anything on Panzer Corps that you sort of are really proud of, that makes you think, right, this is a game that I'm very, very proud of?
I think just as a war game, it just looks so good. It's built on Unreal Engine, which is like not something you necessarily associate with war games. That's the kind of thing that your high-end 3D movies get made on. But taking that chance of going, this is a war game, but we're confident enough in our visual and technical style that we can actually go to that set scale of engine and make something that's beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm really also looking at from a player perspective is that, this was a game that we weren't really afraid of releasing a lot of content on day one. You've got the campaign, you've got skirmish, you've got multiplayer, you've got, map editor. This is a load of stuff in the game, like a lot.
Yep.
And Alex was instrumental in this. We were like, we should make it a smaller game and then add more. And he was like, no, I want the players to be able to sort of almost like play everything released Panzer Corps on day one, which was very challenging and very long to make, right?
Yeah, it wasn't an easy thing to finish. It was an easy game to start, but not an easy game to finish.
And what's the current plan for future content on Panzer Corps?
More. So we've already, I think, got out there. We did the full axis operations again through to 1947. We've done front lines. We've done war stories. As you're seeing on the graphic on there, we've more to come to be announced, I think, at Panzer Corps Day in a couple of days' time. But there's more knitted campaigns, more of the Elite series. There's more developers wanting to make more Panzer Corps content.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about Panzer Corps is that with Panzer Corps, you can create different types of content. And of course, community has been screaming for, I want linked campaigns and I want, allied or, so there's stuff that we know community wants, but also I think that, again, experimenting with different types of
It's
DLCs.
part of the history of Panzer Corps, but let's try that. Even though everything will hit, but if you don't try it, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. What is it that you on the schedule we're gonna do a Panzer Corps Day in a couple of days' time, dig more into the details of what's coming up. What's the thing that you're really looking forward to?
I'm actually looking forward to kind of going to the linked campaign for Allied Italy. I think that'd be quite cool. I've never really done much of an Italian campaign, and I get to go around destroying Italy all the way through.
That's a very good idea. Thank you for thinking of that, which that wasn't my thing, but absolutely. Panzer Corps, showed, I guess, that there was a possibility of making a war game that was appealing to war gamers, but also make it wider audience, right? So appeal to, I would say, and then we're crossing the border. Is this a war game or a strategy game, and so on. So this was, I guess, the first one that showed us that we could do something that was appealing to a wider audience.